Hey guys, you're listening to Wingin' It with Holly. In this podcast series, I'll be sharing the fun and interesting things I've learnt about birds since I started really noticing them 5 years ago. I'm no expert though, so along the way I'll be picking the brains of my knowledgeable birdie friends, the human ones that is, so we can learn and wing it together. You can see birds anywhere, in a city or the countryside, watching from a balcony or your local park. And I'm hoping these short episodes will help you notice and learn more about our feathered friends, especially if you've never taken the time to get to know them before. Back in June, I spent 4 weeks living on a remote nature reserve in the Highlands of Scotland for my work sabbatical, where I monitored one of our rarest birds of prey, the Hen Harrier. Everyone kept asking what exactly I was doing and what it entailed, so I recorded this episode to explain. I kept being asked by people if I was going to record something whilst up here in Scotland doing my sabbatical, so I just thought I'd give it a crack, and if it's worth publishing I will. But yeah, just I guess an opportunity really just to sort of tell people what I've been doing for the last 4 weeks, 3-4 weeks, and why I've been doing it, just in case it's of interest to anybody. So as I've mentioned before, I work for a nature conservation charity, and after 5 years of working there, every 5 years you're given the opportunity to do a sabbatical, which at least in this context means you get the opportunity to spend up to 4 weeks. So it could be 1 week or it could be 2, 3, 4 weeks, sort of spending time working on something to do with conservation, but it doesn't necessarily have to be to do with or relate to the role that you do on a day-to-day basis. And it can also doesn't have to be within the organisation. You could, as long as it relates to nature conservation, I think pretty much, big B, you can sort of take your experience anywhere really. I decided to live and work on one of our nature reserves pretty much as far away from my hometown as possible, and that's purely just because I wanted a really different experience from my regular life, basically. So considering I'm from the south coast and I live in Brighton, I travelled up to the Highlands of Scotland, and I'm really so far high up that yeah, I pretty much couldn't have travelled further on the mainland, at least. Yes, I realise that there is also Orkney in the Shetland Islands, but I've certainly on the mainland I've pretty much gone as far away as possible. And like I said, that was just to get a slightly different experience, and I also had to travel here by train because one of essentially the rules is that we're not allowed, we have to travel here as environmentally friendly as possible, so flying up to Inverness was not an option basically. So I got 4 trains from Brighton to London, London to Edinburgh, Edinburgh to Inverness, and Inverness to where I am now. I'm pretty much in the middle of nowhere. It's a very remote nature reserve, and it's been pretty fantastic actually. It is very different to my normal life the last 3-4 weeks, so at least I can tick that box, and that's been really good. So yeah, what am I doing up here? I have been tasked with monitoring and surveying a bird of prey that we have here in the UK called a hen harrier. Well, hen harriers. I've been essentially looking out for hen harriers. And what are hen harriers, you might ask? They are a bird of prey that we get here in the UK, but they are incredibly rare, which I'll sort of explain as best I can in a minute as to why. Basically, they're really in trouble, and it's really important that we have an understanding of how they are doing, whether they're breeding, where they're breeding, and basically keep an eye on them and make sure they are essentially doing okay. So I'll try and go into a bit more detail about that in a minute. But what do they look like? So they are a similar size to buzzards. So they're quite big birds of prey, but they have a slightly more, in terms of their shape, whereas buzzards have a slightly more fanned out tail. I'm finding that, to my eyes at least, hen harriers have a slightly more streamlined tail. So a slightly kind of longer, more narrow tail, not quite so fanned out. That's at least what I'm seeing. Females have a similar colouring to buzzards as well, which can get a little bit confusing because there are buzzards up here. So that's usually the one kind of like, oh, am I looking at a buzzard or am I looking at a hen harrier, a female? So, but they when you study pictures of them, the females, they are different. They're quite sort of brown and white speckled underneath, at least. And the key thing to identify them, to set them apart from buzzards, is that they have a very clear white ring around the sort of top of their tail, which I can't normally see unless I get a good glance at the tops of their bodies. So obviously when you're watching birds of prey, that's not always the easiest angle to see, because you're more likely to see them from below. But yeah, so females, they have this white ring around their tail, which buzzards don't have. But something that is very, I think, unique to harriers, at least, is that the male is very easy to identify. He is a sort of, he doesn't look like the female at all, really, aside from the shape. The males are a sort of pale blue, kind of a little bit silvery, no, not silvery, but like, yeah, a pale blue, and sometimes almost white to the eye, but no. Do I think that? No, probably not. Basically, very pale blue, and they have black tips on the ends of their wings. I think they also have this white ring around the tops of their tail as well. So hen harriers are ground nesting, which makes them, I think, also quite unique in terms of nesting behaviours of birds of prey. So that means they build their nests on the ground. They aren't in trees or hedges or things. So I guess that is something that makes them slightly more vulnerable to predators, because, you know, if a fox were to stumble upon the nest on the ground, that wouldn't be a good thing. Yeah, they're these big birds that nest on the ground. They eat small birds and mammals. They also, in terms of watching them and watching their behaviour during the breeding and the nesting and the stage at which they're looking after chicks, the parents do this very unique food pass, whereby the male, I'm not sure if it's always the male that's up high and the female down below, but certainly they do this thing where one of them, I think it's usually the male, will be carrying some food, will drop it down to the female mid-air, and she will catch it mid-air. So she'll essentially be kind of flying upside down because she has to have her legs up in the air to catch the food that he drops, and then she'll take it to the nest. So that's really cool, and actually is something that I saw. It's literally the first thing I saw when I first got a good glimpse of some of the harriers that I was watching. So that was really special. They also drop the food straight onto the nest, and also just to sort of little, I don't know, they might just build a pile of food somewhere and just, get food, drop it there, and then take it to the nest. So where can hen harriers be seen? Well, I mean, obviously that's gotten a lot trickier as over time, because they're now so rare, but generally hen harriers live in open areas with low vegetation. So in the breeding season, UK hen harriers can be found on the upland heather moorlands of Wales, Northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland, as well as the Isle of Man. And in winter they move to lowland farmland, heathland, coastal marshes, fenland and river valleys. So I guess I'm just going to try and explain to the best of my knowledge why they are rare. So hen harriers are on the red list, which means basically they are just one of many bird species that we have that are really at risk of extinction. The really devastating thing about hen harriers is that they've become our rarest breeding British raptor, and it's due to illegal persecution. My understanding of this is that certain birds of prey, such as hen harrier, osprey, goshawks, peregrine, that take or eat other birds, have actually been targeted since like Victorian times by people who run or partake in the activity of shooting, because one of the species of birds that they are known to eat are grouse and grouse chicks, which essentially are used as the target for the said shooting. So hen harriers, it seems in particular, are easier to shoot because of the way that they fly, which is low to the ground. So obviously because they are ground nesting, literally the way that they fly and the way that they hunt, which is really low to the ground, the way that they fly over open moorland. Yeah, it essentially seems that they are easier to shoot than, I guess, other birds. But basically, the shooting of hen harriers is illegal. It has been going on since the Victorian period, and it still goes on to this day. So it's a real shame, and it's not natural, basically, that they are kind of disappearing. They shouldn't be, and it's because they are being illegally shot. So yeah. Why am I here? I am here to survey the birds that we think we do have up here on this particular reserve in Scotland. So my day-to-day has involved, essentially, I wake up and I head out in a 4x4 truck with survey forms. I have a map for. I tend to go somewhere different every day, but I have covered the same areas a couple of times, just so that we can, have a good understanding of these certain areas. I drive out in the truck and I essentially sit either in the car or outside on the ground and watch one particular expanse of area for either 3 hours or 2 hours or 2.5 hours, and I'll generally do 2 surveys in one day. And then I head back, and then the rest of the day is mine to do as I wish. So this generally this has been really fun and very interesting doing it on my own. It's been, I think, a really good learning experience. So in terms of the truck, I have to admit that I don't actually drive that often in Brighton. I don't have a car of my own, and I was quite apprehensive about driving a 4x4 just because I've never driven one. But I got here and it turns out it's an automatic, and it's just been so much fun. I've literally just been rolling around in this because the reason we need a 4x4 is that I've actually been going on down a lot of dirt tracks. I'm not on a main road pretty much all the time, so it's been necessary to be in a 4x4. These tracks can be a little bit bumpy, but it's despite my apprehension and my anxiety, it has been a lot of fun. And I'm actually, after 3-4 weeks of driving this, I'm actually going to really miss it. I think it's been really fun. So yeah, I get out to my vantage point spot where I'm basically going to be parked for 3 hours, and I sit and watch and look out for harriers. Every time I see one, I have to make I record it on a map that I'm given. So I sort of I mark on the map what I've seen, whether it's a female or a male, what kind of behaviour, whether it was hunting, whether it was passing food to the other parent or to the nest, whether it was being mobbed or whether it was mobbing, which obviously means when smaller birds are feeling threatened by generally a larger bird, they'll sort of, in numbers, they'll sort of start kind of flying at it to put it off and to deter it from probably a nest that they have nearby. So sometimes the hen harriers will be doing that to other birds, and then sometimes birds will be doing it to them. But I actually haven't seen any mobbing activity related to the hen harriers anyway. So yeah, I sit and watch and record what I see on the map, how many times I see them, what time I see them, and for how long. I also have to record things like the weather at the time of the survey, whether there was good visibility, literally like how many clouds, the sort of cloud cover in the sky, the wind, what direction it's blowing, my visibility. I mean, if it's raining, I guess like it might be poor visibility, and if it's obviously clear skies and sunshine, then that's obviously a good day. Yeah, and that's generally what I record, and I tend to do 2 to 3 hour surveys before moving on to another spot. I also record other birds of prey that I might see, so osprey, I've seen merlin, and I've also seen golden eagle, which is super cool. They were so high up that I can't really say I'm yet to sort of really see a golden eagle, but I definitely have, and I've recorded it onto these surveys because it's also useful for the people who then process this data. It's all useful to them apparently, so I'm just doing what I'm told. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So, and because I've been here throughout most of June and a bit of July, I've basically been surveying at the point at which, if there have been successful couplings, they would generally have nested by now, and also probably have eggs or chicks even, sorry, not eggs. They would have, the eggs would have hatched, and they should in theory be, this is basically at the stage of the year, in the year where they would actually have chicks if they were successful in breeding. So there were people who did similar work that I'm doing. They did it a couple of like a month before me, and they were watching the harriers at the point at which they were sort of courting each other and probably building nests. But yeah, so I've just basically been here at the stage at which they're probably more likely to actually have chicks. And it's interesting because actually I'm not going to give away any of the data I've actually found, because it's actually really important that, well, unfortunately, because of the fact that they are persecuted, a lot of this information is actually like top secret. It's important that it doesn't get out, because they're supposed to be protected, and we want to look after them, and we don't want to give away their location. So yeah, it's actually not necessarily something that I can talk about. But anyway, that's pretty much what I've been doing up here, and I've had a blast actually. Even though I've in the hours where I'm doing the survey, it's just been me and the birds and nature. But I've been able to I've been sat in these most incredible places where literally I look out across me and all I can see is just, well, nature and mountains in the background. And I've had the smell of, you know when you're in nature and you're just really appreciating, you sort of, you stay still for a bit, and you think about what you're seeing, what you're smelling, what you're hearing, and you're kind of just in the moment. And sort of, this is very different to what I do on a day-to-day basis for my work. So I've definitely enjoyed being outside every day and taking in the spectacular views of the Highlands and the sounds of the birds. I've basically been followed by skylarks for 3-4 weeks, and if you know what skylarks sound like, you know that it's quite a treat to just have that as your background noise every day. So yeah, it's been great, and I don't know if this is even worth an episode, or if people will find this interesting, but I'm doing it also mostly because people kept asking me, am I gonna do an episode about my sabbatical? So that's this. Yeah, hope that's been interesting. And if anything, I hope it's a raised awareness of our rarest breeding British bird of prey. They shouldn't be rare. It's because of humans that they are. So yeah, if you ever do see a hen harrier, it's a privilege, really. They're really cool birds. So yeah, that's me signing off. Hope you've enjoyed that. And see you for the next episode. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and if you have any birdie questions you'd like me to explore in this podcast, you can get in touch via my Instagram @wingingitwithholly.